Welcome to Restaurant Relevance, the podcast, where the goal is to glean operational tactics for restaurants from data-driven research, possibly nerding out along the way. I'm Nathan Jarvis. Welcome to those of you who are tuning in. Before we dive into the show, here are the highlights and key takeaways. So to recap, consumers obviously do have some perceptions of cleanliness, and they're really good at the clean areas, not so much at the dirty areas, which we probably extend to management and staff. And so there are areas in the restaurant, mostly high touch points, which are dirty, even though they may look clean. And so we want to incorporate those areas into a regular cleaning program so that we don't forget to do them. And even if we just choose a few of them to incorporate into our program, we're at least touching more of those high touch points with a cleaning program to try to reduce contamination. In this episode, we're featuring research published in the International Journal of Contemporary Hospitality Management, entitled The Cleanliness of Restaurants, ATP Test Reality versus Consumers' Perceptions. So reading this article really made me think back to the first project I worked on when I started my PhD. I was helping another grad student, and we were swabbing tables for ATP values, just like they did in this study. So it kind of made me reminisce a little bit. I find this research really fascinating because I like seeing comparisons between what we as people think is true and some objective value, and seeing where the differences are. It's interesting. We'll see in this study how close human perception is in certain areas and how really far off we are in others. So let's jump right in. We're fortunate to have two of the authors of this research with us today. Dr. Tony Kim joined James Madison University, the Hart School of Hospitality, Sport, and Recreation Management as an assistant professor in 2016, right after he received his PhD in Hospitality and Tourism Management from Purdue University. He also received his Master's of Tourism Administration, concentrating in meeting and event management from the George Washington University. Further, he has a Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering and Engineer Chemistry from Hanyang University in Seoul, South Korea, and a BS in Hotel Administration from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. His research interests include food safety and sanitation, hotel and restaurant cleanliness, and consumer behavior in restaurants. Prior to his PhD, Dr. Kim worked as an assistant general manager in the international franchise restaurant sector for 8 years. He's published numerous peer-reviewed journals and actively serves as a reviewer for the Journal of Food Service Business Research and International Journal of Contemporary Hospitality Management. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me here today. Thank you.
Absolutely. We also have joining us Dr. Cheryl Klein. She is the Deputy Dean of the Alfred Lerner College of Business and Economics and the Aramark Chaired Professor in the Department of Hospitality and Sport Business Management at the University of Delaware. Before joining the University of Delaware, she served as interim dean and associate dean in the College of Hospitality, Retail, and Sport Management at the University of South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina. Dr. Klein developed her research interests while at Purdue University, where she held the position of the C.B. Smith Professor in the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, and was the director of the Center for the Study of Lodging Operations. Her research focuses on organizational behavior and training in the hospitality, meeting, and event industry. Dr. Klein is ranked in the 25 most productive scholars in the field of hospitality management, which is really impressive. She began her academic career at Widener University's School of Hospitality Management, and before joining academia, she had a successful career as a manager in the casino, hotel, and resort industry with over a decade of industry experience. She holds a BA in Economics and English from Rutgers University, an MS in Hotel Administration from UNLV, and a PhD in Organizational Psychology from Temple University. Welcome to the show.
Nathan, thank you for having us.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have y'all here today. So, where I always like to start with my guests is I want to start at a really high level. And so in 2 sentences, would you explain what your study was about and what you found?
Sure, Nathan, but it might take 3.
Okay, that's fine.
We compared restaurant customers' perceptions, and we actually surveyed restaurant customers of what is clean in a restaurant to what surfaces are actually clean We measured that using ATP meters. The surfaces that were found to be actually clean were aligned with the customer's perceptions. If it was actually clean, they thought it was clean. However, where the surfaces were found to be dirty, the customer's perception was off. And that's what makes this interesting to us.
Interesting. So we're pretty good, it seems like, at assessing if something's clean, we know it's clean. But if it's dirty, we're not good at that type of assessment then.
Yes. And then the last part is we actually have recommendations for the industry and
Cool.
what they need to do to ensure that they have a clean and safe environment for restaurant customers.
Awesome. All right. So we'll definitely get into those recommendations at the end. As I was reading through your literature review, I was reminded of something that I think would surprise most operators, and that is, and maybe even most people in general, that the food code in the United States basically says that the restaurant's responsibility extends to ensuring that customer expectations are met, right? Regarding that food is prepared in a clean environment and honestly presented. So that's going beyond just, are you preparing the food cleanly, but it has to somehow meet customers' expectations. Can you talk about how does this play into your study?
So customers have right to know how their foods are prepared in the restaurant. So that is why, for example, the restaurant inspection results are available to public most of the time on their website in the health department. But however, in this study, we try to highlight that surfaces that consumers believe to be clean should be clean, and restaurants should provide that cleanliness to the customers.
Awesome. Okay. And so as you kind of say at the beginning, you're looking at both customers' expectations or perceptions, as well as actual cleanliness. And we'll talk about here in a minute how you determine those things. And you were trying to determine, is there a relationship between those two characteristics, right?
Yes. So we wanted to see if the actual cleanliness of the surfaces in the restaurant actually meet the expectation of customers. And we also want to inform the restaurant industry as to how to clean their restaurant dining rooms and restrooms as well. So their improved cleaning practices can be more efficient and can provide cleaner environment for their customers.
Awesome. Okay, so digging into your methods or your kind of a protocol for conducting this research, you choose to define cleanliness as free from visible dirt or soil, meaning, I guess in layman's terms, does it look dirty or not, right? Does it look like it's clean or not? But of course, a surface could be visibly clean, but still have microorganisms on it, something that people are probably much more aware of right now because of our current COVID situation. So why, I think I know the answer, did you choose this definition for cleanliness for your study?
So Nathan, that's a great question. And what we found is that customers use their perception to determine cleanliness. They don't walk around with an ATP meter. They don't have a way of assessing if something's clean when they come in to dine or even stay in a hotel. It's all done through their eyes and maybe through touch. So we used a term that's pretty standard in research as well, and visibly dirt or soil that fit into that definition. And when restaurant managers and guests come into a restaurant and look at their restaurant, they're actually determining, it looks clean, it looks neat. And maybe they'll even touch a surface and say, oh, it's not sticky, it feels and that's why we use that as the base definition.
Gotcha. And then, so you already referenced ATP as a method that you use. Can you, briefly explain what are you measuring when you're using ATP? What is it in layman's terms?
Great. So an ATP bioluminescent meter, you actually have a meter and you have a swab, and you swab the area, and it has to be a specific area that you measure. And what you're measuring is actually organic matter and living cells. Now, that doesn't mean there's microbes there. That doesn't mean it will hurt you. Dirt could be involved matter that it would measure. You put the swab into the device and it actually uses light. That's why bioluminescent to measure the level of dirt. Now, why did we choose ATP meter to do this? First of all, they're very easy to use. As you know, they're very quick.
Yep.
You'll get a result in 15 seconds or give or take. And it's used very heavily in food service manufacturing facilities, and also in the back of the house in restaurants. What was unique for us is we were one of the first studies academic studies to do this in the front of the house of a restaurant and use it in this way to compare to customer perception. So it was a standard way of measuring dirt or cleanliness in food service facilities.
And if I may add, a lot of hospitals using this one as well. And also this is very cost effective compared to other, microorganism test.
Yeah. So obviously I have a background in food microbiology. So I immediately think about, well, you could have taken samples and tried to plate it up and grow the organisms, do some sort of a colony forming unit count or something like this. Obviously ATP is faster and cheaper. So I understand both of that, but were there any other considerations on why you chose the ATP versus some sort of like a culture method?
Well, I want to say that it's easier to training the restaurant managers because a lot of time the restaurant managers, they are not major in biology or chemistry. So it is easier to teach them how to use this device correctly. So that's another reason that is widely used.
And we have done studies where we did plate up and look for microbial matter. Again, it just takes more time and it's very expensive.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I did a lot of that in my PhD, growing bacteria. It takes a lot of time, Okay, all right. So, and then part of your protocol or your methods were you tried to differentiate between, surfaces, as you call them, touch points that are touched a lot versus very little, a high touch point and a low touch point. Can you give some examples of these, either that you'd predefined or that you found through your research? And why is it important to think about high versus low touch points?
Well, I want to say it is important because CDC actually recommend to clean high touch surfaces more frequently compared to low touch surfaces. It starts from the hospital all the way down to a restaurant and any other like a customer service involved area. And we also wanted to see if there are any differences in actual cleanliness between high touch and low touch surfaces. For example, in dining area, most of surfaces that we chose were high touch surfaces, except the bar stool that we chose. And among them, top 5 high touch surfaces were perceived as clean, as most of them were used to eat their food. For example, silverware, plates, and cups, glasses. So, or the salt and pepper. Those items are high touch surfaces because people use it when they eat them. Eat the food, right? And however, in the restroom area, most high touch surfaces were not perceived clean by consumers because they go to the restroom, they touch the surfaces, and they believe the restaurant don't clean that properly. However, low touch surfaces in the restroom were perceived clean because, well, they don't clean and people don't touch it. So it's not really contaminated.
Interesting. So, and this is going off a different direction, of course, as I'm thinking about this, but it's almost as if the consumers were thinking about surfaces through their own behavior. So basically they associate, well, what do I touch on a regular basis? And therefore that must be dirty. But if I don't touch it, it's probably clean. That's kind of was the thought process.
Yes, exactly. So also like they believe how frequently, like how good the restaurant or the operators actually clean those surfaces as well. And a lot of time, it was before COVID-19. So before that, people didn't have a good trust toward the industry.
Okay. Yeah. So this was, you collected this in 2018. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. So it's been a couple of years. Okay. Awesome. All right. And then one more kind of methods question before we get into what you found. Obviously, as researchers, we consider the theoretical side to be quite important. And you framed your research with what you called, or is called in the literature, an expectation and disconfirmation theory, EDT. So could you briefly explain what EDT is and why was it relevant to your research?
So basically, we did not test this theory in this study, but we used this theory to explain consumer satisfaction and dissatisfaction level. And we
Okay.
didn't test the satisfaction of the consumers, but what they confirm or disconfirm can actually affect their satisfaction toward the restaurant experience. So basically, expectation and disconfirmation theory is that when consumers expect something and is disconfirmed, that which means it didn't meet positively. For example, they believe it's gonna be dirty, then they found out it's clean, then nothing happened. But they believe it's gonna be clean, then it turns out it's dirty. That means they disconfirm their expectation negatively. In that case, the dissatisfaction happens. So that's why we want to use this theory to test. That's why we use this theory to explain how consumer satisfaction happens.
Gotcha. So it's almost as if they have an expectation and you meet it, there's no positive outcome because that was kind of like their baseline expectation. Like,
Exactly.
good for you, you did your job. Whereas if you don't meet it, then there's a negative outcome because you didn't even do your job, you didn't even clean it. There's no upside, but you still have to meet it to prevent a downside. Is that kind of right?
Yes.
Awesome.
It's like a maintenance factor.
I'm sorry, say that again.
It's like a maintenance factor. You just
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You have to meet that minimum. Okay. All right. And in your study, you surveyed customers online using MTurk, if I remember correctly. So you sent out a survey, had a bunch of people answer it. And so what did you find when asking consumers about these high-touch surfaces and their expectations? What were some of your key findings?
We did not ask the satisfaction per se for this study. So as the study focuses on actual cleanliness. However, the theory itself can lead us to how consumers will be satisfied or dissatisfied based on confirming and disconfirming their expectations.
Okay.
And, we found that certain surfaces that the guests thought that were perceived to be clean, as Tony mentioned, were the ones that they come in contact with the most. So not surprisingly, that included plates, glass or cups, napkins, silverware, the tabletop surface itself, the bar table, the kind of the back of the dining room chair, they didn't think about so much.
Okay.
But that's something that we also tested. Also, the hostess stand, the count, where you stand up. If you think about it, everybody goes up to the hostess stand and touches it. But that came out lower on their perceived cleanliness list, which makes sense because they're thinking, well, I go up and touch that too. In the restrooms, the areas that were perceived to be cleaner, again, as Tony mentioned, were the ones that are less touched. So mirrors, walls, the soap dispenser. People, although that is a high touch area, I guess so.
Yeah.
Because
and then as you go down the list, the areas that customers thought were the dirtiest, and I think they perceived it accurately, the door handle for the restaurant. The inside as well as the outside door handle, the pen you used to sign for credit card. I know since Tony and I did this study, we bring our own pens everywhere. The pager, where you're waiting, if the restaurant used a pager.
Oh, yeah.
Things that light up, everybody touches those. And, the assumption is maybe they're not cleaned as much. The menu, and I'm sure, Nathan, you're aware there's been a lot of menu studies actually done by our colleagues. The restaurant bill holder, when you get the bill, whether it's a fold over, kind of document or a plate. In the restroom, again, the areas that were perceived to be dirtiest were the toilet flush handle, the toilet seat, the door lock inside the stall, the inside handle of the restroom, and then the outside handle of the restroom, and the sink faucet handles. So again, the people who were surveyed assumed where they're touching the most, those were the dirtiest areas. However, that's not necessarily, it didn't line up with what we found with the ATP meter. It did for the clean areas, but not
for the dirty areas. So let's talk about that. So you do ATP readings, and so let's talk about those dirty areas that consumers perceived to be clean or cleaner, but in fact were dirty. So what were those areas, and I mean, what do you think's going on there?
So for example, the hostess stand area where most people actually go up and lean on it or put their hands on it. I mean, if you
Right.
reflect on the last time pre-COVID, you went in a restaurant
Yeah.
and put your name in. Well, that came out as our highest RLU area measured, the hostess stand, the bar table. So when you're sitting at the bar,
Yeah. The bar
and
top.
again,
Yeah.
that did not come out as high in the minds of our customers.
So,
The restaurant outside door handle did that pretty well lined up, but the dining room chair back and dining room seat and restaurant inside door handle were getting a little bit more clean in terms of how we
In your
measured
mind.
it.
okay.
In the bathroom, the door lock inside the stall, I mean, I think that's intuitive, but that came
Right.
up as our dirtiest area. It was fairly dirty in the list for our customers as well.
Customers.
Sink faucet handle did, and our customers
Okay.
did not think that was as dirty. Outside door handle of the restroom and soap dispenser and then flush handle were the next dirtiest, but I would group them together. I mean, the RLUs were pretty close, and I will say they
Okay.
were very high. Unfortunately, overall, when we looked at all the surfaces in the dining room area, they
Right.
all fell below the level that we had set for cleanliness. So what that means
Interesting.
is there's opportunity for improvement for restaurant managers and staff to clean. However, the guests did not perceive that. The guests
Right.
did perceive the things they touched to be most likely to be clean when they're eating: the plate, the glass, the silverware.
And if you think about it, like all those surfaces in the restroom turned out dirty and perceived as a dirty, is those surfaces are the surfaces that people touch. They actually touch before they wash their hands. So restroom door handles and the lock, the flush. But once they clean their hands with the faucet and the soap, they perceive those surfaces are clean.
Yep. But then if they're not using a paper towel, they're going to have to go touch the lock again, the door handle again. Yeah. Go outside and pull the chair back, touch the chair back. Yeah.
Got it.
Of course. And we haven't even talked about people's cell phone, but that's an entirely different study. So, all right. So, I mean, you talk about that y'all had kind of preset a level for if it's above this threshold, we're going to declare it dirty. And it sounds like all or almost all of the surfaces you swabbed exceeded that. So from your study and or your professional opinion here, is it a matter of needing to clean more frequently, doing a more thorough cleaning, or doing more thorough sanitizing? Like, which of those three factors is at play here, or is it all of them?
Well, I want to say all of them.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to say all of them.
I agree.
Yeah, but based on my experience, I work in a restaurant for 8 years and I work as a TA in the restaurant as well. So based on my experience, those areas were not cleaned as regularly as we want it to be. So like, for example, restaurant managers, they ask their servers or their employees to clean the tables and wipe the floors and clean the windows. But not many restaurants, in not many cases, they clean the chair back or the restaurant door handles or hosting stand. So if manager can include those surfaces on their regular routine or daily cleanliness, it would be nice. And of course, like we said earlier, it has to be more thorough every time they clean any of those surfaces.
Right.
And I think the recommendation is clean the high touch surfaces more frequently. And when we say clean, we mean clean and sanitize.
Yes.
You need, since we're in the COVID, soon, hopefully post-COVID part of our lives, sanitizing is much more important for many reasons, not just COVID. And that will also prevent other types of, sharing of diseases and infections.
Yeah, absolutely. All the things that we got before COVID on a regular basis. So you say clean and sanitize, and just so that anyone listening, we're all talking about the same thing. In your mind, cleaning and sanitizing, does that mean that I can just walk up to the table with a rag and a bucket of sanitizer and wipe it down and I'm good? Or in your mind, what is cleaning and sanitizing?
So when I think of cleaning, it's a little bit old fashioned, but elbow grease. You need to really rub the surface, and you should clean it and sanitize it. That there are products that do both at the same time.
Right.
But in other research studies, we know, I'm sure Nathan, you know from your work, that you have to make sure you have a clean rag. Just because you clean something with a rag doesn't mean, or a sponge, those items have to be clean. And the people doing the cleaning must wash their hands or use disposable gloves and then change the gloves.
In between.
Because there are concerns about cross-contamination. So sanitizing involves, just for layperson, when it says 99.9% of the viruses are killed with this product, that's a product that sanitizes. And most restaurants use sanitizers in the front of the house as well. But I think it's the frequency that needs to be focused on. And we also found those high touch areas were not focused on by restaurant managers.
Gotcha.
The employees need to be made aware of what's high touch. I think we all know silverware is high touch, but they don't think about the door handles, because if you're a food server, and many of us have done that, right, when we started out, you're focused on the table. But there are other aspects, as Tony mentioned, the furniture. The bar top in particular needs a lot of attention, and it needs to be cleaned frequently. Think of how many turns you have at the bar. And it needs to be not just wiped down with a dirty bar rag or a bar rag that's been used several times, but it needs a clean bar rag, a little elbow grease, a little pressure, and then sanitized. And sanitizer has to sit a certain amount of time in order to work. A lot of people think, I'll just spray it on and wipe it off. Well, depending, and you follow the instructions, it could be anywhere from a minute to 10 minutes. Most of our products that we use, without mentioning names of companies, they're a minute to 3 minutes. But it has to sit on there before your next guest touches it in order to work.
Which means in a busy environment, and a lot of operations are right now, on top of being short staffed, right? You really, very few people want to have to, sanitize the tabletop and then let it sit there for 3 minutes wet before you seat someone, right? It's churn and burn. And so it's not really getting the time to sit to make sure that it's doing the full job.
Correct.
Yeah. I can see that. Okay. What else? All right. We already talked about you collect this in 2018. So this is pre-COVID. And so as you're talking about some of these things like higher frequency, using gloves in between different, cleaning or different tables, some of these things are things that restaurants are now doing, either because they have to, because a municipality or state is making them, or because they're adopting that as an industry. I know here in Texas, our restaurant association came out with kind of a pledge for, this is what we as restaurants in Texas should be doing, and this is what we recommend, and I believe that's part of that. So what other things do you think, now that we're in a COVID environment, how do you apply your research to this situation, or have you seen it maybe applied where if you did the research today, would it be different because people have made changes? Sorry, that's kind of all encompassing.
We just did the research yesterday. We just collected.
Really?
Yeah. So you said do the research today. So we just swabbed a restaurant today. We've done some a couple weeks ago. We'll do some next week. Because we are replicating the study just for the very reason you said. Tony, you want to talk in a little bit more detail about it?
Yeah. So like a lot, as you mentioned, a lot of like a cleaning procedure has been changed due to COVID-19, and how they serve and how they deliver the service have been changed. So that's why we want to replicate this study as a post-COVID-19 study. Well, let's say post-COVID. I know it's not exactly post-COVID.
Yeah.
But a lot of things changed. So that's why we want to do, and we want to compare. Luckily, we didn't expect this COVID-19 happens, but luckily we have data from 2018. So we want to compare how the consumers' perceptions have been changed and how the actual cleanliness have been changed. So like Dr. Klein mentioned that we are collecting data. So we just finished it yesterday, one site, one restaurant and one hotel, and we will do again next week. So we are in the process of collecting data. So we don't have the result yet, but the brief look, also we finished the survey of the consumer's perception. In a brief look, it looks like, I have to double check, but I had a little bit of like a preliminary analysis of the survey data. It looks like consumers believe the restaurant surfaces are cleaner than before because they pay more attention to cleaning.
Cool. Well, it'll be exciting to see it come out.
Yeah. We're looking forward to crunching the data. We do think anecdotally that you mentioned the Texas Restaurant Association. We believe the National Restaurant Association from Delaware, the Delaware Restaurant Association has been doing a good job at making customers aware that restaurants have really ratcheted up their cleaning processes, that we are creating safer environments for people to eat. It's not just surfaces, it's also air quality as well. But a lot more has been in the news about these issues since BC, before COVID. Tony mentioned we did a study using ATP meters in hotels that shadowed what we did in the restaurants. And so we're replicating this as well in hotels. So we're replicating that study. We are also, you talked about microorganisms. We're also now measuring coliform and E. coli. And we want to see, is that present as well, which was not done before. But there's now a test that's pretty rapid that you can do that. You still have to grow it, but not in a petri dish. It's in a test tube. So
you're doing like a PCR type or rapid flow or
rapid, yeah.
Rapid,
yeah. So just to add, like we know that ATP meter detects the living organic materials, but it doesn't tell if it's harmful or not. That's why we want to do this study. But at the same time, still ATP is reliable because at least it shows that if the surface has been cleaned or not. We just added one more, method to confirm.
Awesome. Well, I'll look forward to your next study or two coming out. Maybe we'll have to have you back on and we can do kind of a comparison and talk about what changed. All right. So obviously you looked at a bunch of different surfaces, right? And so all of them, all the high touch, well, all of them are important, particularly the high touch ones. But knowing, and we've all worked in restaurants or the industry before, so we understand from an operational standpoint, you can only focus on so many things at a time. So if I had to force you to choose maybe 3 extra places in the restroom and 3 extra places front of the house that as a manager, like I only have a limited amount of bandwidth that I can spend a little bit more time, what would those 3 places in each place be?
Well, I'll be a little bit tricky here. So in front of the house, I will choose hostess stand, bar table, and restaurant's outside door handle based on ATP result. I say that because, in the restaurant, if you're going to serve the customers, you have to clean all the other surfaces anyway, like tables or silverwares or plates anyway. And if you think about it, this makes sense because the restaurant door handle is the first thing the customers are touching when they enter the restaurant. Then they might put their hands or arms on the hosting stand while they're talking to the hosting staff. Also, if you think about the bar table, that's the place that customers are hanging out while they're waiting for their tables. And most of the time, the bar tables are wet and have some moisture because people spill or some have, waters everywhere. So that will help the pathogen to grow. So that's why I want to pick those 3 surfaces. And for the restroom, I also want to go for ATP results, ATP reading results. So which will be door lock inside the stall, sink faucet handle, and outside door handle. Again, like I mentioned earlier, those surfaces are the surfaces that you touch. You actually before you actually wash your hands. So,
and to take it a step further, if they could install touchless fixtures. So, for example, the paper towel dispenser was found to be one of the dirtier areas in the bathroom. Make it touchless. the ones
Okay.
where you wave your hand. If you
Right.
can have the door open automatically for the restaurant, make that touchless. And then you reduce the number of surfaces that have been touched, therefore reduce the labor you need to clean, because we all know in the world we're living in today, it's a huge labor shortage, which
Yeah.
we normally have that issue in our industry. It's been really exacerbated due to many things that are going on right now. So if you can provide more touchless devices, that would be helpful and to reduce the need for cleaning.
And to that, in things like the touchless menus, the QR codes, that's a great example of applying
Yes,
this. Okay.
correct.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So now I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here. And this is coming. So, as researchers, we always have to acknowledge what the limitations of our study are, right? It's really important because it's almost impossible to do a study that covers every scenario out there, right? And we can only collect so much data. So I think from an operator standpoint, it's helpful to ask, well, what if the research is wrong in some way, right? So for example, let's say an operator does adopt some of your recommendations and starts cleaning high-touch surfaces more. What if we later find out that this research isn't the whole picture, or there are limitations to the application of some of these results? What could some of the are there any negative outcomes for the operator having adopted more cleaning procedures to later find out that we weren't quite right in our recommendations? Is there any that you might expect?
So I guess you brought up really good points. We did our best to include all those high touch surfaces, and we tried to include as many surfaces as possible. But you also forced me to choose 3 surfaces in
I
the
know.
restroom and the dining area, but it's just our study. The different
Yeah.
study can have different result. So what we want to show in our study is that try to focus on high touch areas, high touch surfaces in the dining area, in the restroom, doesn't really matter. Focus on high touch surfaces. That can be changed while we change our dining behavior. Like we mentioned earlier, maybe we have a different technology. Before we look at the menu, now we scan the QR code, or we order
Right.
from the tablet on the table, or we download the app. So we might have different high touch surfaces than before than our
Right.
study. So as a restaurant managers, try to focus which surfaces people touch more frequently than other surfaces. So try to focus on the surfaces and change your cleaning procedure based on that observation as well. That's the one takeout that we want to give from our study.
And how you do it is important as what you do.
Exactly.
So if you clean it and you're using dirty rags or sponges, even though you spent the time, doesn't mean
Right.
it's going to get clean. So you really need to focus on using your chemicals properly and training people properly.
Yes. Challenges we've all faced for years. Doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't.
All right. So if you were running a restaurant today, you were the owner or the manager, how would you use these findings to make your restaurant a better operation?
So I would look at the high touch areas in my restaurant, and I would create a training program so that people clean those high touch areas. And I would make sure we do a deep cleaning every night. We have a cleaning crew that comes in every night because I can't just rely on my servers to do that. I also want to communicate to my customers, and this can be done overtly or maybe covertly, that my restaurant's clean. And so posting on the door, for example, the Delaware Restaurant Association says this is what we do to make sure our restaurant's clean for COVID. I would have those posters posted there. Also in the bathroom, if you see this is not up to your cleaning standards, please let management know. We'll take care of it right away. It's as important to let your customers know that you care about cleanliness as it is to keep it clean. You have to do both. I think our study found it's not just making sure that it's clean, but making your customers aware that you're cleaning. So it's 2 things you need to do.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't take a lot of time to train. You do your huddle in a restaurant. I'm sure you've all been, we start the day, focus in your huddle on some aspect of cleaning, not just what our special today is, and make sure you sell more wine or more apps, right?
Right.
So I would put cleanliness into that huddle routine. Again, something a lot of restaurateurs don't always think about, but it's important because it's important to our guests.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Anything else you want to add?
Well, adding to that, like I want to say, don't be shy cleaning, because before, like a cleaning has to be behind the scene. Like of course you have to clean before you are ready for customers, but even if there are customers, like you can still clean your surfaces. And trust me, customers, when they come to the restaurant or the hotels in any places, times like this, if they see that you pay attention to the cleanliness, if you pay attention to cleaning the surfaces and disinfecting the surfaces, they will appreciate. So don't be shy for cleaning any of your surfaces.
Awesome. All right. So to recap, consumers obviously do have some perceptions of cleanliness, and they're really good at the clean areas, not so much at the dirty areas, which would probably extend to management and staff. And so there are areas in the restaurant, mostly high touch points, which are dirty, even though they may look clean. And so we want to incorporate those areas into a regular cleaning program so that we don't forget to do them. And even if we just choose a few of them to incorporate into our program, we're at least touching more of those high touch points with a cleaning program to try to reduce contamination.
Exactly. Yep. And it matters. It matters to our customers. They will return if they know it's clean, as well as if your food is good and your service is excellent. So put that up there with service, good service, high quality food, and cleanliness. The trifecta of a successful restaurant.
Awesome.
And Nathan, we would like to also thank our co-authors.
Oh, yes, please do.
To this. So the Cleanliness of Restaurants ATP Tests Reality versus Consumers' Perception was a process between 3 different universities, JMU, Purdue University, University of Delaware, and Tony was the lead author, Dr. Kim, Dr. Barbara Almanza from Purdue University, Dr. Jing Ma from University of Delaware, Dr. Hake Park from Purdue University in Fort Wayne, and myself. So it was truly a national, across country and university effort. So we'd like to thank our co-authors as well.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be on the show with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nathan. This was fun. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. This is fun. And thank you to those of you that are tuning in. If you have questions or comments, please email me at nathan@restaurantrelevance.com. Ciao.